Excellent. Welcome to tonight's tasting. What a fantastic thing to do on the Friday night before Christmas. As most of you know, we can't do our tastings in person at the moment. Well, truth be known, we probably could do them in person at the moment, but have decided at this late stage to let our poor, very tired team focus on what they're doing in store. So we decided instead of that, that we would do something via Zoom, and are very lucky to have with us tonight Charline Drappier. It's all of 7 a.m. In France at the moment, and Charline, absolutely delightful to have you join us online tonight. Welcome, thank you. So what I'm going to do is, if you haven't already, please open your bottle, and please, Mike, you need to open your bottle, and you need to pour it into your glass, and we will let Charline start telling us about Drappier and about Grande Sendrée. And as we do, I've got you on mute at the moment, but you can unmute yourself, and we're not too large a group tonight, so please feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask any questions or talk directly with Charline. So over to you, Charline.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to start with a nice sound. So it's a good Friday morning for me. And I think I will wake up all the kids. Yes. Okay. Yes. Good evening or good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Liz, for the invitation. And thanks for letting me speak to you. It's been 2 years without the contact with New Zealand, so I'm very excited to be with the Glengarry community, and thank you for joining us with a glass of rosé today. So santé, santé. I don't know if you see. Yes. Cheers, santé. So I don't know if you are familiar with the Champagne Drappier. I know Glengarry has always been very loyal in promoting our family champagne for many years. So we're very lucky to be part of the selection. We are a family based in the southern part of Champagne. So the geography of Champagne spreads between Reims, which is the north part, and then it stretches to the south on the Burgundy border almost. And we are on that southern part of Champagne, which is called the Aube, A-U-B-E. And we are on the southeast corner of the Aube. So it's called the Côte des Bars. And historically, we have a lot of Pinot Noir. So you have some Pinot Noir in your glass right now, and you can probably taste it. So the Pinot Noir was brought by a Burgundian monk who's called Saint Bernard to Champagne through the Aube. So we have a story of 800 years of growing Pinot Noir in this part of Champagne. And as a result, today it accounts for 70% of what we grow. And what we grow is 62 hectares now. That we own, and then we farm another 50 hectares. So that's my brother's job, Hugo. Hugo is handling all the viticulture, and now he's transitioning to making the wines too, as well with my father, Michel. And we also have a younger brother who's called Antoine, and he's responsible for all the horse plowing of the estate, because we farm half of what we own organically with accreditation. So it's 30 hectares that we farm organically, including the Grande Sendrée. Since 2017, it has been certified. So the story of Drappier is quite different than most champagne houses, because we started as growers, and we're still growers of grapes. It seems very logical, but it's quite unusual in Champagne. So the 8th generation of actually farming grapes. And eventually my father took it to maybe another stage in the 80s, when he started to focus a lot more on the wine he was making, because his background was in wine. And because he came from education in Burgundy, he definitely brought this back to Urville. And the story with the Grande Sendrée started because he wanted to select a parcel and vinify it separately. And you have to think that in the 70s, Champagne was very different than today. Prestige Cuvée were mostly about blending different parcels together and selecting maybe one vintage. But a single parcel as a Prestige Cuvée was still quite unknown. Only a couple of houses would do clos or single parcel vineyards. And he took this Burgundian approach to Champagne and then decided that this parcel, which he inherited from my grandmother, was very good for aging and has a very complex soil. I'll get back to that a little later. And it was worth vinifying separately. And then this is how its first vintage of Grande Sendrée started in 74, which was not a great vintage, but he had to start at some point. And today we don't produce it every year, sorry, obviously not every day, but not every year. So it's only the best years. So going back to the philosophy of Drappier, there is definitely a Pinot Noir focus, strong Pinot Noir focus, with even some Blanc de Noir. So this is the kind of a specialty that we focused in. About 30 years ago, we started making Blanc de Noir, which was not very fancy at the time, because the variety that was fancy. Hello, Jack. I can see the I can see the blue sky, which I love, because in Europe is mostly darkness these days. It's the middle of the winter and it's still dark. It's 7 a.m. So yeah. So going back to the Pinot Noir, there's definitely an heritage of Pinot Noir. My great grandfather, so my grandmother's father, was known as Père Pinot, which translates into Father Pinot, because he defended the plantation of Pinot Noir in the southern part of the Aube, which was historic, but it was slightly endangered because it's a very fragile variety. And today, I don't know if it's him or just the work of all the growers back in that day between the two wars, Pinot Noir accounts for 70% of the Aube. And the Aube is not small. The Aube is about 30% of the total vineyards being planted in Champagne. So a very strong focus on Pinot Noir. In terms of vinification, Drappier is always very low in dosage, even no dosage. So one of the very first no dosage in Champagne. And we find that balance of low dosage because Pinot Noir is a very rich, full body. I don't know if you can say that in Champagne, but it's pretty much what Pinot Noir brings to Champagne. So the Drappier style will be always to kind of is a matter of contrast between heavy in Pinot Noir Champagne and yet finding the minerality in our soil, which is Kimmeridgian limestone. So Jurassic Kimmeridgian limestone is the specificities of the Aube terroir, which is a very hard word to pronounce, just to say it's a very old stone that we share with Chablis. Chablis has the same soil on their Grand Cru. So it's a very nice contrast between the full body and the minerality, and we're trying to enlighten because we put low dosage. So you should find some of these features in the Grande Sendrée because that's very much the identity of Drappier. Natural champagne, quite expressive champagne, and at the same time we still want to have a lean and mineral finish with low dosage, no filtration, no discoloration, and low sulfur. Also, that's a very big part of Drappier. We put very low added sulfite in our champagne, to the point that we started to make a non-added sulfur champagne, which was the very first non-added sulfur champagne. So even if you drink the whole bottle by yourself, you shouldn't have any headache after tonight. I hope you don't. No judgment. I have my own, even though it's a half. Before I talk a little bit more about the Grande Sendrée, Liz, would you want me to answer any question or?
Does anyone have any questions at this stage or?
What was the dosage of this?
4 grams.
Okay.
Yeah. 4 grams. Our max would be in the whole range would be 6.5, 7. But in the Grande Sendrée, it's 4, which is usually a dosage we like on vintages. So the Grande Sendrée is, especially the rosé, it's very, very small production. So, which is actually why I don't get to taste it today with you, because I didn't, I wasn't allowed to take a sample. But I have some rosé, so I'm not complaining. Non-vintage rosé. So the Grande Sendrée Rosé would be saignée method on most part of the wine, which is 80% of the wine is Pinot Noir made by saignée. So just to clarify what saignée means, it means that the Pinot Noir goes through a maceration for a rosé. So it's a skin contact maceration, and it's quite rare in Champagne, even though it's the old method. The more common method is rosé d'assemblage, where you would blend a red wine with a white wine, which is, I believe, 97% of all champagnes are made by assemblage. Because of the culture of Pinot Noir in the Aube, and probably also because we're very close to l'Hérissé, which is a rosé producing village, there is a tradition of skin contact maceration rosé. So all our rosé are made this way. We either make 100% Pinot Noir, non-vintage, which I have in my glass, rosé, which would be full fruit, a little darker in color. Even what you have in your glass is quite an intense rosé that is given by the saignée. And we extended this idea to our vintage rosé, which is the Grande Sendrée. However, it's interesting when it ages to blend it with a little bit of Chardonnay, so it can get just that soft and more complex when it ages, and lighter features in a vintage. So it's 80% Pinot Noir as a saignée, and then at the blend we add 20% of Chardonnay of that very same parcel. So it's an interesting champagne because you have the depth and the all the aromatic features from the saignée, but the 20% of Chardonnay will just make it lighter and brighter when it ages on the lees. And it's 10 years on the lees almost. I believe I don't have your bottles in my hand. You can check the disgorgement on the bottle if you have good eyes, but most of it was disgorged earlier this year, so early 21. So it's possible that it's probably aged 9 years on the lees, which is very which is what we aim to do with the Grande Sendrée. Do you like it? Important.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
Yes.
Very good. Very nice. Yeah, it's lovely. Absolutely lovely. Great.
So, Charline, is the Chardonnay in the vintage, is that in the Pinot planted in approximately those same proportions? So there's around 20% Chardonnay planted, or is that quite different actually?
And actually, this parcel we use it also for our white Grande Sendrée, and our white Grande Sendrée is 55% Pinot Noir and 45% Chardonnay. Okay. So there's a little bit more of Chardonnay in the parcel than what you have in your glass. I think actually it's a little over 2/3, 1/3 on that parcel. So
so when you're making the 2 Grande Sendrée then in a vintage, how do you make the selection for which part of the Pinot Noir goes towards the rosé and which part of the Pinot Noir ends up in the Grande Sendrée Blanc?
That's a good question, because that's a decision we have to make at the very beginning. which is also one of the complexities of making Sendree Rosé. Because when you make a blending rosé, you just pick a small amount of red wine, and it's not going to be very risky because it's always a small amount. It's 5% of your total plot or your total blend. When you make a Sendree, you have to decide on the day you pick the grapes. So it's usually a combination of the I don't know if you say that, the sanitary state of the grapes, I don't know, the health of the grape, the maturity, etc., etc. We don't produce rosé every time we produce white, because sometimes just the year is great for white, but it might not be fit to go through the Sendree, because the Sendree is a very, very tricky. For instance, we didn't produce Grande Sendrée Rosé in 2009 when we did for 2000 for the white. So it's and sometimes it's also not the same. We are on a certain vintage on the white, and not a certain vintage with the rosé. So it's a lot of complex decision making. But the most important is what do the Pinot Noir look like on the day we want to pick up. And it's usually, we take that decision very late in the harvest, because it's talking about the plot. It's a north-facing, almost a north-facing parcel, which is very interesting when it ages, because it brings that depth, the complexity, when it ages, but it's a quite tricky parcel to get ripe. So it's usually the last parcel we harvest at the estate. And this way we have the whole time of the harvest to make a decision whether we'll make a Grande Sendrée Rosé or not. So yeah, going back to the few words about the geology, I don't want to bore you with this because it can be very, very boring, but it's the subsoil is actually Jurassic emergent. We talked about it, which is the main stone of Urville, but the topsoil is used to be a beach. So there was a beach in Champagne, yes, many, many years ago, 145 million years ago. And because it's facing the main slope, it has pebbles, like broken stones. So the topsoil is more fragmented, and it allowed some clay to get in. So there is a nice depth to that soil, making it not too mineral, or less mineral than our other parcels. So it brings a nice richness, and when it ages. I didn't talk about wood use. So we use a little bit of wood in this wine. It's 30% during approximately 10 to 12 months. So there is we use big food. So those food are 5,000 liters, and we might use only one. And so it doesn't impact so much the flavors of the freshness and the flavors. So it's very, very moderate how we use wood. But there was always a little bit of oak aging in Grande Sendrée. So it just adds some micro oxidation to the Pinot Noir and adds complexity. So, and then after we do the blending, which is very, very little blending job, that's the easy part on Grande Sendrée because it's just the parcel. But this is not blended before going through wood. This is just the blending is happening very classically in Champagne right before bottling. Then we bottle it. We use a indigenous yeast, and we just forgetting in our very, very old cellars for 9 years. Disgorgement, add 4 grams of liqueur de dosage. So the liqueur de dosage we use is our own. We make our own liqueur de dosage, and interestingly enough, the liqueur de dosage we use in Grande Sendrée is much younger than the one we use in our non-vintages, because it already holds this depth and complexity. We don't want to use additional aged things in the champagne. So we use a very kind of neutral, very fine Pinot Noir liqueur, 4.5 grams, so that you can still have a nice fruity and intensity. The aim of Grande Sendrée is still to have something that tastes like wine. So Drappier is very much like a wine. So we don't want to have a, I don't know, superficial rosé or something like that. We still want to have something that you can match with your food. So if some of you have the patience to keep the bottle for your dinner, you can definitely enjoy it with white meat, definitely white meat, and fish, or what's the name of crustaceans?
Crustaceans.
Yeah.
That's right.
Something like
Charline,
that.
the use of oak, is that something that you've always done, or is the use of oak new?
I think we've had our food for 25 years. So the first vintages of Grande Sendrée may not have had oak, but it's been a while now that we've been using oak, but always partially. So we have different sizes. So because, you know, at Drappier, we always make all kinds of experiments. So the winery looks like a experimenting lab. And but it's been a while. So we use either now we start using barrels, but in very, very small proportion. Still not using oak during fermentation. So that's something we've never done. And I don't think we'll ever do. Many reasons, including that because we go through the malo, because we have a lot of Pinot Noir. We don't want additional weight for fermenting. So it's only aging of our reserve wine. And we actually brought new food 3 years ago. So we do have maybe a higher proportion of oak in our vintages, but still we don't use oak in our non-vintages.
Yeah,
Does that answer your question, Liz?
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. And I think there's a different texture, I guess, on the palate of this wine that I'm finding to perhaps what I've seen in Grande Sendrée in the past. And I think also there's a beautiful sort of chalky character to it, which I really like. Yeah, definitely. So before we go on, are there any questions anyone would like to ask of Charline?
So just a quick question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There you go first.
So obviously, when you have the small parcel of the wine that's in the oak, the other is just sitting in the stainless steel for the same 10 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So just curious, and I don't know how other houses do, but I've always read that some of the other houses do some of it in oak. Is it 10 months kind of the standard? That seemed like a lot longer than I would think.
If you if you want to have sort of an impact of the oak on your champagne, you would need at least 8 months. Below that, it's not, just doesn't have time enough to not to take a woody character, but just to get that micro oxidation. So actually some houses would do even longer. But it all depends on the style of champagne you want. If you want like a sort of a not just name a few, but like Krug, or what they would keep their reserve wine in barrels, so with a stronger oaky character for 3 years, no problem. It's just a matter of style. Yeah.
Very
good, thank you. And Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, this is a 2010 vintage, and it just tastes so fresh. And I just wonder, like what are the aging sort of recommendations? Like I can't believe it, how fresh it actually tastes today. It's absolutely beautiful, and I like that vibrancy that typically goes with age. And I guess if this had another 10 years on it, would it still present similarly? I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, you remind me that I totally forgot to talk about the vintage. So thank you for reminding me that. Yes, the Grande Sendrée is really created in order to hold aging. So hopefully you can age it for another 10 years, 20 years, no problem. It will evolve. About a month ago, we had one of the first rosé Grande Sendrée, which was from 1996. And it tasted still very fresh too. It will show a little bit more on the color, because on the rosé you see the oxidation faster, so you will have sort of that orange peel, salmon, or even deep orange style, especially if you have a saignée. So because the color is more intense, when it gets older and it ages, it will get a deep orange, which I personally love, and then you have a concentration and intensity in flavor that is interesting. 2010 was particularly cool. It was a very cool, not an easy year in all parts of Champagne. As usual, the Aube is quite different than the rest of Champagne in many ways, and that goes also for the climate, because we usually don't have the same pattern than in the mouth. So we actually had a very good, cool Pinot Noir year, which helped us, I think, getting this balance where the summer was very chilly, and now is what holds the wine, because it makes it very fresh even after 9 years on the lease. So that's, to us, it's very important that we have this freshness, especially on the rosé, especially on the saignée, because it could be heavier because of the saignée, it could be heavier because of the proportion of Pinot Noir. So our big focus is to get that freshness over time. And it's really important that we that we enable the wine to age for another 10 or 15 years, because some of our customers would like to just collect it and just open it in 10 years. And it's a very great challenge for a champagne maker to make sure what he's put in the bottle will be fit to drink in 10 years. Then it's just a matter, another 10 years. It's just a matter of taste. So some people would think it's too old because it does lose its bubble. But to me, this can take another 10 years, no problem. So I'm glad you appreciate that complexity and freshness in the 2010. Thank you for the compliments.
Speaking of the bottle, Charline, the shape of it is beautiful. So it's a reproduction, obviously, of a very, very old bottle. What was the story in the 1970s when they started Grande Sendrée? How did they decide on that? Was it a bottle that you guys had in your cellar, or where did that shape come from? Yeah.
I did forget to talk about this too. Thank you for reminding me. And I also forgot to talk about the story of the Grande Sendrée. So I'll start with that. No, the Grande Sendrée is a parcel. So I said from my grandmother, that used to be a wood in the 19th century. And in 1836, there was a big fire in the village, and that expanded to this wood, and it burnt. And all the villagers would take their ashes to this place, which they soon called the Sendree, which literally means the cinder place in French. The ash place. I don't know if this is a word. And they started planting the vines after 5 years, and it had different terroir, different place, and even the name was different. And this is where the name for the Grande Sendrée, the Great Cinders, comes. Even though now we don't have any, smoky. Sometimes I hear people think that maybe there may be some smokiness. Well, it's too long ago, so there was nothing with to do with the ashes now, but the name. So there was this a mistake in the book, and the C turned into an S, and we kept the mistake. So it's constantly with an S. And when we started making this wine, we did use a shape of a bottle that my grandmother found in our old cellars, and it was a bottle that we researched for, and it comes from the 1700s. That's why it has different shape, because back in the days they could only blow the bottles, and it was always bigger at the bottom, because that's where the air would go. And we kept that shape. We patented it, and now it's our Prestige Cuvée. It makes it harder to handle because we cannot riddle by machine, we cannot disgorge by machine, so it's all riddled by hand. The Grande Sendrée, everything's manual, and it's also has, if you pay attention, it has very narrow neck, and we get a little bit of less oxidation, so that's also interesting when it ages. So all the shape and all of this is was actually a good surprise that we found this bottle, and it's a perfect complement for the wine.
It's interesting, because you guys have been doing that bottle shape for such a long time, and then over the last decade we've seen lots of other producers start to go to that more elongated neck, and that for that exact reason, for oxygen transfer, and that's so
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
you guys just did it naturally.
Yeah, we were lucky to have it in our cellars, honestly. Yeah.
What's the reason that it can't be riddled or disgorged by machine? Is it because of the difference between the neck size and the base size?
Yeah, it's not parallel, it's not a cylinder, so you cannot stack them on, for example, most champagnes are riddled by Giraud palette, but because of the shape, it just doesn't fit in a Giraud palette. So we just have to put it in a very classic riddling rack, and the same reason with the machines, because the machines are not fit with this type of bottle. So it's actually a very small machine that you have to put the bottles yourself, etc., etc. So it makes it's quite a long process and complex that it's put in this bottle.
Do you have how many staff do you have on site to do the riddling process?
So there are 3. They can do other things too. They can be, labeling or other things, but they do riddle every day. Yeah. So 3 master riddlers. I mean, 3 people that are good. Like if you put me in the riddling cave, I know how to do it, but it's probably going to take me 3 days what they do in an hour.
That's always exciting. It's always nice hearing. I mean, I know a lot of the other houses, the Prestige Cuvées are riddled by hand, and I always like that little touch, and I think it's a good, it is a marketing tool, and I do like it though when you hear that, these are all riddled by hand. It's just kind of, I think, classic.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. We riddle also by hand all our large formats, so anything bigger than the bottle, even if it's a Carte d'Or, is riddled by hand, all the way up to the large formats to a 30-liter. Obviously, everything's done by hand with that too.
I remember when Michelle was over here and Hugo was here that trip as well, and we opened the Melchizedek, and he said that when one of those explodes downstairs, it feels like a bomb has gone off underneath the house, and you can feel the whole house shake.
It's impressive. Did he tell you that when they did that, the first times we did it, we didn't pay attention how we were stacking them, and they were close to each other, so one just triggered the explosion of all of the others. We didn't do that mistake the next year. It was like a flow of champagne in the cellar. It was at the very beginning when we actually were working on the type of glass we were using, the mold, and the everything that's to do with the. Now it doesn't happen anymore, so it's good for you and good for us.
Is Grande Sendrée produced in larger format as well?
Magnums.
Magnum only, okay.
Magnums,
we need to get some of those.
Yeah, they're really delicious now. We are on 8, so fresh in the Magnum. So we're selling 2008 Magnums, delicious. We're talking about Jeroboams, but it's a new mold. So it's another story. Maybe we'll get there one day.
Liz, some Grande Sendrée Magnums, please.
I did hear that. Very good. So have we got some more questions for Charline or comments on the wine?
So not so much a question, but a comment. Like, we're not huge fans of rosé. We have the occasional one. This is stunning. We love Pinot, and this is just so much nicer than what we actually kind of, I guess, imagined it would be. The story that you're telling behind it is amazing. And we haven't even waited for dinner. We've actually done a salmon platter, and I can tell you, Bahuta with smoked salmon goes perfectly with it.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. But no, loving the story, loving the wine. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's I usually say that it's a rosé for not rosé lovers. So you're the perfect example. Thank you.
Very good. Is there anyone else? What do we think down there, Mike? You've gone silent again. I muted you. You were making too much noise. Oh, they might be coming back.
Oh, I think Mike
we've got
is raising a hand, but we cannot hear.
Yes,
There we
we're
go.
unmuted now.
Unmuted now.
So thank you. We very much, very educational and much appreciated to hear about. I've bought Drappier over decades, so and I've always bought the rosé, not as much as the normal Sendree, Grande Sendrée, which I also enjoy, and I probably, if you do a presentation on that, I would have lots of questions as well. But I very much appreciated that you spend the time to chat about this, and it's hugely educational and lovely to hear about what produces the wine directly from the people that make it.
And it is a lovely dry, but flavoursome champagne.
It's a wine. It's a wine.
It's a
isn't it?
wine.
Yeah, it's a wine.
It's a
It's
wine,
serious
as you say.
wine. I've always thought of it in that way. And if you talk to Reagan, they'll know how much I've bought this over the years. And it's nice to chat with you.
Can I just say also that I'm really happy with your explanation of the meaning of Sendree, because I remember learning French and hearing about Cendrillon, the Cinderella, with a C, of course, then, but
Yes.
to learn that there's been a misappropriation of the
Typo.
S. Yeah, typo. And so now it's all explained, and I'm really happy with
Yes, now you have the explanation. I actually never made the connection with Cendrillon. Yeah,
that. Oh, there you go.
Cinderella. Thank you for your kind words. And thank you for being loyal to our Grande Sendrée. We're really doing it. It's pretty much all of the efforts of the Drappier family into that bottles, maybe the white or the rosé. So we really appreciate. Thank you.
Yeah, there are many other wines that you produce that we also, would be interesting to hear maybe a bit more about. I know it's not, we don't have time right now to discuss that. But
I'm sure Liz will set another
Yes.
another tasting,
please.
maybe a real one one day.
absolutely.
Play. You come to New Zealand. We'd love to.
Yeah.
We drink,
Or you
drink
come to
other wines
Champagne.
as well.
Oh, we've been to Champagne. Come to Drappier, though. That'd be great.
Santé, thank you.
Thank you.
Santé. Empty glasses, I love that.
We run out of wine.
We run out of wine. There's four of us. There was only meant to be me, but
Very good. And have we got more questions for Charline or thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about how the recent harvest was and any challenges with that season or anything.
Yeah, it was a challenging season. 2021 was tough in many ways. We had frost, we didn't have hail, but we had everything else. So frost and mildew coming from a very, very humid season. So every producer everywhere in France, actually, so it's not only typical for champagne producers, had difficulties growing grapes this year. Actually, the quality was good, except that it was kind of very reduced by this mildew attack and by the frost that we had in late April. So it's definitely not going to stay in Champagne's books, but at least the good thing is that in Champagne we have réserve qualitative, so the reserve wine that would help us go through the very low yields of 2021, and this will really help us because champagne is going the sales of champagne are very high now, so we're trying to figure out how to do this with a very small harvest. So that will be our 2022 challenge. We'll figure it out. Don't worry, you won't like any champagne in New Zealand. We'll find ways.
We're pleased to hear that. Very good. Cool. So before we let Charline go and perhaps get the small children in her house up for the day.
Breakfast.
Yeah.
And have breakfast. Are there any more questions?
Finally, are there tours? Do you guys offer tours when we go to Champagne?
Yeah, we're not like, we don't have like a full tourist installation. However, we do welcome you in the and do a tour and a tasting, and we'd be really pleased to have you. Yeah, it's not, don't expect to have like a mini train in the cellars or something like that.
We've done those. We've done those. We like the non-touristy ones. We like the other ones much better than the little train.
Okay, then I'm glad
That was
Mercier.
That was Mercier.
Mercier, is that the one with the train?
Mercier, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mercier has this. Yeah. It's
Please.
nice to see his work.
Yeah. And please do let us know if you're going to Champagne, and we will reach out to Charline and organize that for you. So yeah, please always feel free to do that.
I'll be happy to have you. Sure.
Very good. So anything more before we let Charline go? I think what we can say is thank you so much for jumping online so early in the morning, Charline, and for taking us through Grande Sendrée. And it's been fantastic to catch up with you. And also for those who have joined us online live, and for those who I know are watching this later, thank you all very much. We are missing so much doing tastings in person, and we can't wait to start doing them again next year. But we weren't going to let a year go past without doing a champagne tasting somehow. So this was our somehow we were going to do it, and I couldn't think of any better wine or person to do it with. So thank you very much, Charline, and our best wishes to you and to the family for Christmas, and to everyone online. Cheers.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everyone. And Merry Christmas with some champagne, hopefully.
Of course.
Thank you for your time, really.
Thank you, Charline.
Thanks.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Charline.
Thank you. Thank you.